Well, I have this beautiful gathering in front of me, and I also am mindful of the people who might watch this talk afterwards, who are maybe newer to Zen and part of the 49-day training. So I'll try to hit the right balance, but there'll be plenty of time for discussion as well. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you have either were participating live or watched Whitelaw Roshi's talk on time, the first one in the 49-day training? Okay. And then quick show of hands, what about Gordon Green Roshi's talk just like a week ago? Awesome. Okay. Okay, this is the bonus round. How many of you saw my talk, I Don't Have Time, that was part of the 2022 lecture series? Okay, so we got some solid B's in this group. And then Heather, you might be the only one who also saw my first ever Tay show at Daiko Zenji. Although that might have been open to the public, I also talked about time in that talk. Anybody remember seeing that besides Heather? Unknown. Well, if any of this sounds repetitive, there are some themes that will be repeated. But you know, the lineup of talks, Heather, that you've assembled for this 49-day training have really been something. You know, Ginny's talk, Time Doesn't Flow. She had that great graphic about what time looks like from several different perspectives, and the reinforcement that we're always in the eternal now, 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 now. And that's what our Okyo sounds like, you know, that to be nimble on your feet every moment. You know, both Ginny and Gordon, Whitelaw Roshi and Green Roshi, have their PhDs in the sciences, you know, much like Heather as well. So they come at this from things that, you know, I don't remember being great at school, like equations, right? Where T is in a lot of those physics equations. It's in a lot of, you know, equations that have anything to do with, you know, change over time. So for both of those PhDs to say that little t in all those equations is just an illusion, it's both like makes you feel very shaky, because you're like, wait, this is a significant part of every equation and you're saying it's all an illusion. It's like building something with Legos that just melts, you know. But the freedom in that as well, to think that this thing that we thought was real and concrete and solid is not, it's just an illusion. Thinking back to Whitelaw Roshi's talk, one of the big beats that I took away from her talk as well was, you know, the relationship that we have with time is a brain-based relationship with time. It's a psychological relationship with time. It's a concept. And like all other brain-based or psychological relationships, you can change it, you know, and that's what this 49-day training is about. Coming to Gordon's talk, he reinforced this idea of time being an illusion, and it's all based on having a fixed perspective. So excuse me, he read that beautiful passage from Einstein's dreams. And some things seemed fixed depending on your point of reference. Some things seemed to be moving depending on your point of reference. And I think the key for us is to realize when we are the fixed point of reference, right? When we are the fixed point of reference, because that's when we're in the illusion. We're not a fixed point. we also are always changing. You know, how many cells will have died in your body, be regenerated in your body, in the next 30 minutes. So we're always, always, always changing. And then I looked up the Sandy Denny song that Gordon talked about because I couldn't quite get the rhythm and the beat and the melody from his singing of it. How do the birds know when it's time to take off together? How do the birds know when it's time to take off together? You know, they're not all wearing iPads on their tiny little bird feet with a little alarm. It's time to go. Something else is happening. So in the wake of these two terrific talks, I enter this space with you tonight to reinforce that time is not outside of you. You are time. You are time. The Greeks had two words for time, two words. The first one, chronos, what we now think of as chronology or tick-tock time, the seconds, the minutes, the days, the weeks, the months. And that is useful as an agreement. That is useful as an agreement. It's how we knew to join the meeting tonight. It's how we know when to be at the airport to catch a flight. You know, think about that. You know, if we're all going to Geneva together for spring sashimi, we're all catching flights at different times and we're all making these agreements, these global agreements to get there, to train together. You know, one big jet, hundreds of people have to share an agreement to be ready to queue at the right time. So that chronos definition of time, it has a real usefulness, but it's an agreement. It's not real. It's an agreement that we've made with each other. I mean, the idea of having time zones didn't even occur until like the mid to late 1800s, right? Before that, you know, a lot of things were based on the diurnal rhythms, you know, night and day, the seasons and so forth. So this notion of time outside of us, chronos, chronological time, is new. And you know, it wasn't enough to have a minute hand. Now we have to have a second hand. And if you do anything on your, you know, watch that you're timing, your stopwatch has hundredths of a second hands. And it's like we want to cut this thing that's already an illusion. We want to cut it into smaller and smaller pieces. It's such an active illusion that we have about chronos, tick-tock time. But the Greeks, the other word that the Greeks used for time is kairos, Kairos. And the best translation that I can find is the supreme moment. And when I first learned about these two words for time, the supreme moment, I saw a lot of it being written in the Christian church, the traditional Christian church. And I was raised in a very strict and conservative Christian church. And the supreme moment, right, would be something like when you were saved, right? Or if you were confirmed, or you had your first confirmation in the Catholic Church, or you know, a moment when everything changed for you. And there was a scarcity to that interpretation of the supreme moment. Because in my experience, the now that Whitelaw Roshi talked about, it's all a supreme moment. You know, right now, we are making something together. this configuration of people is making something together. I'm not making this. You're co-making this, right? James Blatchley, who's one of our dojo members and just won a Grammy Award a year ago for a recording that he conducted with a symphony. He is confident that when the audience is listening with complete attention, the quality of the music is better. That there's a felt sense that when we bring our all as an audience listening to this orchestra, it impacts the quality of the sound that comes out of those hundreds of musicians playing together. The supreme moment is being made again and again and again and again. So what Zen brings to this is an awareness that we are in this eternal now, and the energy that we bring to that can be very free-flowing, or the energy we can bring can be stuck, like White Law Roshi talked about, those tiny little air pockets in the plastic wrap. Pop, 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 right? How do we bring an energy to the eternal now that creates life, that gives life, that doesn't discourage life or kill life? So if we can accept that Chronos is like this agreement that we make with the world about what time is, but Kairos, the supreme moment, is happening at every moment, and how we show up to that affects the quality of the moment, right? That's the table stake for tonight. You know, as a futurist, my profession as a futurist, I'm working always with clients on how to think about the future, how to imagine the future, how to create brighter futures. And sometimes when people find out that I'm also like a Zen nerd, they try to trick me in this question. They're like, but you're a Buddhist. Aren't you supposed to be focused on the present? Aren't you doing it wrong as a Buddhist if you're thinking about the future? And that is one of the many challenges I get in thinking about the future from challengers. And the truth of that is that as long as whatever you're doing in the present moment, you're being wholehearted about, you're really going for broke about, it doesn't matter what you're doing, right? So if we're sitting down together and we're thinking about a 5-year future and we're bringing our very best to it, that's being present in the moment. You're just using this planning time, right, to think about the future. So it's possible to be a historian and be present. It's possible to be a futurist and be present, and a Buddhist. All of those things are possible. And to come back to this idea that we are time, there's a fascicle by Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, called Uji. He had a real ability to put two different words together to create like a new word that was really resonant. And Uji means being time, or time being. So these two ideas of being and time being one thing, not two concepts, one concept. And the way this fascicle starts is this way. It's a series of couplets, and I want to read it to you because it's going to come again. into this idea that you are time. An old Buddha said, here are the couplets: "For the time being, I stand astride the highest mountain peaks. For the time being, I move on the deepest depths of the ocean floor. For the time being, I'm 3 heads and 8 arms. For the time being, I am 8 feet or 16 feet. For the time being, I'm a staff or a whisk. For the time being, I'm a pillar or a lantern. For the time being, I'm Mr. Chang or Mr. Lee. For the time being, I am the great earth and heavens above." So what is Dogen doing here? I mean, each one of these lines, he's doing something, right? But the thing that is consistent among all of them is what? For the time being. For the time being. Every single one of them is for the time being. And that's you, and that's me. We are the time beings. We are being time, right? So he starts with, I'm the highest mountain peak. I'm the deepest depth of the ocean floor, right? He goes on, I'm the 3 heads and 8 arms. I'm 8 feet or 16 feet. I'm a staff or a whisk. Very useful things that everybody knows how to use. I'm a pillar or a lantern, also very useful things. I'm Mr. Chang or Mr. Lee. That would be the equivalent in America of saying like I'm Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, you know, just everyday kind of people. I'm the great earth and the heavens above. So he's drawing these contrasts. For the time being, that's the consistent piece. I'm this or that. I'm this or that. I'm this or that. The consistent piece is the time being, the immovable wisdom, right? The mind that has no place, no dwelling place. That's the time being. And then I can express myself as the highest mountain peak or the depth of the ocean floor. You know, I can be a person of everyday substance. I can be a whisk in the kitchen, right? And what those things are lenses on the eternal present. They're called Dharma positions, right? So they are all things at once, connected in this time being, this eternal present. And the reason Dogen sets this up is because he's trying to set up the absolute and the relative, right? The absolute that we are all time beings, and all of these different Dharma positions co-create one moment, each moment new, each moment fresh, right? Dogen's hyphenated uji, being time or time being, it reminds me a little bit of Thich Nhat Hanh, right? Who talked about interbeing, that we are, you know. Cynthia may be sitting a continent away, and yet we are right here together in this moment. And we are. Is it my voice coming out? Is it Cynthia's voice coming out? Right? How is it that, you know, she may have an experience where she knows where my sentence is going, right? Or she's so resonating with what's happening in this moment. It's as if she could be doing the talk because she's interbeing. We are interbeing, and all of us can be having that experience. We aren't always, but it's always possible, this notion of interbeing. So these notions of taking concepts that seem separate or unrelated and saying, illusion, delusion, we are, and we are time beings. That time is coming through us. Time is not outside of us. Time is something that comes through us in these supreme moments. The places where you can most easily maybe touch into this notion. Well, I mean, let me just ask you, when have you experienced the eternal now? Anybody? The feeling that time is not outside you, and maybe time isn't even a thing. When have you experienced it? Yeah. And you haven't left your body, and you haven't, there is just an interpenetration of that moment that is outside of time, is timeless. And it has the benefit of, it's also very intimate with another person. So there's an interbeing that is also happening in that moment, in that time. Thank you. Others? Yes, the carbonation of life. Yeah. Yeah. You get into those flow states, and they're pre-verbal almost. There's something so primal about that. Others? Any others? Good. That means it's working. Cynthia, what about you? I think you had your hand on the mute button. Absolutely. Let me share. My pets, I think, are excellent examples of time beings. I'm sitting here with my little dog Pip, and there are times when she hurries, but it's not because she's late for anything. She hurries because she's doing what a dog is doing. Like if she gets up from a nap and she really has to go to the bathroom, she hurries to the door. It's just very natural. She hurries to the window when that dog that she hates goes walking by, right? She hurries to the window. But beyond that, she's in her pace of life. So animals and nature, as Heather said, babies, with their just wondrousness, can help bring you into that eternal now. So, I want to read something. Several years ago in IZL, we always pick a book, and we had done one a couple of years ago called The Big Leap. And in this chapter towards the end, he says, the one thing that's going to really increase your ability to take a big leap is to change your relationship to time. And so he starts with the Newtonian idea of time, which is the one that has really impressed itself on the Western world, which is this idea that time is something outside of us and it's finite. And that's why we have to rush. And that's why we have to schedule. And that's what, so this is the agreement that, like the Western, very time-based world has made about Newtonian time, accepting Newtonian time. It's a dualistic relationship. It pits us against time. And then he talks about the Einstein version of time. and I'm going to read this to you. To get to the new expanded version of time offered by Einstein, we need to make a few changes in how we think about space. When we're running on Einstein time, our experience of time changes because we make a fundamental change in how much space we are willing to occupy. Now, I'm going to just pause here because you all gave examples when you didn't feel time, that you were in that eternal, endless moment. How much space were you taking up? All the space. What space? How much space does a belly laugh take? How much space does great music take? By learning to occupy space in a new way, he writes, we gain the ability to generate more time. The act of contracting your awareness away from space makes time congeal. Its time seems to slow down and harden. The more you cringe from pain, like, ouch, the slower time gets. It hurts for longer, right? But the opposite is true as well. If you let yourself fill the space, eyes 180 degrees, right? Feeling the entire space, being the entire space, time expands, seems to expand. Time is not a constraint anymore. When you're willing to occupy all space, time simply disappears. You're everywhere all at once. There's no place to get to, and everywhere you are is exactly the right time. So my challenge for the rest of this training period, and as you deepen your own Zen practice, is stop thinking about time. Start thinking about occupying all the space. And I'm not saying that, I hope you're hearing me, I'm not saying it in a hoggy way. You know, when you can be the entire space, you can do the right thing in the right moment in the right way. Kanon, 1,000 arms, all being activated in the right way, in the useful way, to alleviate suffering, to end pain, to give life. So for me at this point in the 49-day challenge, I'm done talking about time. It's time to start talking about being the whole picture. Being as big as a laugh, right? Taking up all the space. Stop thinking about time, worrying about time. We are time beings. From the highest part of the mountain to the deepest part of the ocean. We are Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, right? We are that. We are that. All in this one supreme moment. That's it. Jazz hands. Any questions, concerns, things to add? Extrapolations? Thank you, Cynthia. You always have such a lovely way, such a poetic way of restating things that, like, it helps me go deeper too. So thank you.
When you were talking about the Chronos time, I was thinking we in the US just went through the time change on Sunday, and I'm still suffering from it. Like I had the hardest time waking up this morning, and then I showed up to Zazen too late because I was the it's still light out. It was still light out outside, and I was doing Zazen at night for the first time, so it's like I wasn't paying attention to what time it was. So and it's interesting because that's like such a good example of reality by agreement, and like Cynthia's country is not changed, and how our relationship to Cynthia is different. So it's a really strange thing.
I was just thinking about the agreement, and it reminds me of a story I heard once from a friend that she had experienced where she was hosting, she is Kazakh, so from Central Asia, and she was hosting a party, a dinner party, and she had invited all Kazakhs and an American Peace Corps volunteer. And the Peace Corps volunteer showed up at the time that the party was supposed to, the party starts at 5. Peace Corps volunteer showed up at 5, so he would be on time. No one else was there. She had made the food, and in her culture, the guest comes, so you should feed them. So she started giving the Peace Corps volunteer food, and he started eating to be polite. And she kept feeding him because he kept eating, and he kept eating because she kept feeding him.
Oh, no.
And about 2 hours later, the rest of the guests showed up at the time that was like really the time that they should be there in their culture, because that is the agreement. And there was hardly any food left
Food left.
because the poor Peace Corps volunteer had eaten himself sick, because you don't say no when people give you food. And she couldn't believe that he kept taking the food that she was giving him, because you should say no 3 times before you stop giving. And it's like the example of like the agreement was really misunderstood, right, by all parties.
Right.
And it was all about time, really, and trying to be polite and on time. And I always
Yeah.
think about that because it was such a screw up.
Know what the agreements are in a culture, right? Like, so like just to wrap up, I want you to really think about space. And that includes like your body doesn't lie, right? So if you're getting contracted about time, you're not in rhythm. You're not being the space. So let your body tell you, what's happening, and breathe into that. Breathe into your width and your connection, your height and your dignity and your depth and your connection to your past and future, and see how that changes your relationships, your awareness, your usefulness. So instead of saying, have a good time, I'm going to say, have some good space tonight. Have some good space. Thank you.